Welcome to the Know Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Purposeful, and this week's episode features Matt Gottesman. He's an author, speaker, consultant, and the founder and editor-in-chief of HDF Magazine. He's also the co-host of a podcast called Hustle Sold Separately and has been featured on multiple publications such as Forbes, Inc. and Mashable over the last few years. So Matt, it's a pleasure having you on, man.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. And thanks for, it took a few extra weeks to get this to happen. So I'm really grateful.
No, definitely. Likewise. So, I've been following HDF for quite some time on Instagram. And I think that was the first thing that actually stood out to me was the consistency in the post that you've done, because it's probably been a few years since I've been on Instagram following it. But before we get into the story of HDF, what I wanted to ask you is the first post that you put on your personal Instagram was, "It all started with a dream." So tell me about that. What is your dream?
Wow. That's you're the first person to actually ask me about that post. That's pretty cool. When I said it all started with a dream, I was thinking about 4 years ago when I didn't necessarily know what I was doing with creating HDF as a platform. And I know a lot of people out there, that's the phase they get stuck in, because it's sort of like, well, I don't know how it's all going to come together. And so they don't, but I was taught by family and from mentors and advisors that and then of course it's a famous saying, but like everything starts with a dream. Like, and if you can do that and then you just start taking like one step at a time, things start to come together. So for me, I wanted to change the perception of entrepreneurship to be more real time and journey driven. That was one part of the dream. I wanted to recreate how the media talks about success in entrepreneurship. So I knew that I wanted to somehow have a media company that was around purpose-driven content, but real and relatable, and that made people feel less overwhelmed by where they think they have to be, and more at peace with the process, if that makes sense. And then also feel like supported and surrounded by lots of really great people around the world doing really unique, interesting things. And so that was that part. And I wanted to find a way to help out. It's a two-part process. I wanted to find a way to help out, millions and millions of people, but not at the cost of me. And what I mean by that is that prior to that, I had my energy was drained from a lot of different things. And sometimes we can give too much to just a few people. And we don't realize that if we give to ourselves first and overflow that way and lead from within, then we can actually impact millions of people. And so I knew that I had to actually start with me first. So it was, it all started from a dream.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So it's almost like you turned inward at that point to see what it was that you needed to do to feel fulfilled before you went out to start helping others. Is that sort of the feeling that you got?
Yeah, I had no choice but to go inward because so I started my business entrepreneurial journey years ago. I mean, I started really as a kid, but and so we grew up through social media, but prior to social media, it didn't exist. And so my previous business endeavors and then personal life, a lot of things got stripped from me, as I've kind of mentioned before. And it forced me to a place where I was like, okay, if I'm going to do something different, I got to start with me first. You know what I mean? Because like, how can we help everybody else out if we don't really know who we are first? And I realize it doesn't always go that way. I have some very amazing friends who, they're pretty introspective and they've built massive companies, but they're now just coming to realize like, oh shit, okay, so I built this company, but who am I in this bigger picture? Like, what do I like? I want to create a different kind of impact. So I started at the beginning before launching, HDF or any kind of online platforms. I started with myself, and then basically bringing that forward so everybody else could see it along the way, and then just have like a real relatable conversations from there.
Yeah, so it sounds like from that yeah, so it sounds like from that process, then I guess HDF was born as a result of that, as a result of you feeling that way. So tell me about like sort of HDF and what that stands for and what it is that you've accomplished
Yeah.
over the last few years with it. Yeah.
So HDF, it stands for hustle and deal flow. So it has two different meanings in the market, which is kind of funny. When I started it out, it was meant to be hustle for like that innate, that work ethic that comes in, with creators having to create their vision. And deal flow is actually a term in the venture capital world for like number of deals that that firm is working on coming through their office to like make happen, right? So creators and their companies. What ironically happened in the market was people took it as, oh, I get it, like hustle, deal, flow, like hustle, deal with it, and flow, like just keep moving. And I really didn't want to correct them because I was like, you know what, that's still very applicable to my audience, my demographic of what I was going for. And it was it was meant to be a platform for several reasons. One, I wanted to, we're almost going on 4 years at this point, and it was meant to um, remove the glamorization and glorification of end success and feature the creators on their journey, who were also they're successful. I mean, they're in that 6, 7, 8 figure range, but they're just not being featured yet in mainstream media. Two, I knew we were going to be heading into an era of content marketing and influencer marketing, and I knew that the new influencers are the creators, and so I wanted to be prepared for that. Three, I just needed a platform to talk, man. I think I was so raw from business experiences that had happened to me and some personal, that I wanted to just express myself and in the process make it so other people felt like they were less alone in their process of being, on their journey, and the anti-status quo movement, as I like to call it often. So yeah, so that's how, and then it just started to grow from there. And then the short, I'll try to get to, I guess, the short version of that is that I launched it, and then about 4 months in, Case Kenny of Pursuit, PRSUIT.com, and at Pursuit on Instagram, he hits me up in the DM and he says, "Hey, like, you feature creators from all over the world and you're growing, and I have creators from all over the world who are writing about their experiences, sort of like a news platform for the millennial generation. Call me." And I called him and I said, "What's going on?" He said, he's like, "Man, I dig like what you're doing. It's different, and that's kind of what I'm doing, and it's different. And we're not some." He's like, "I get you. You're not a quote account. Like, and we only had like a couple thousand followers each." And he's like, "You're not really a quote account. You're like a business and life like account, like talking about the journey." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I have people writing about their journeys, and it's about the journey." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I don't know how to work together." And I said, "Why don't we just help each other? Like, we don't have to worry about forming a company right now." He said, "Great." 2 weeks after that, I was at Phoenix Startup Week in Phoenix, Arizona, and some gentleman comes to me and says, "You, like, HDF, I heard you talking. I heard and you gave a speech. Tell me why you're doing what you're doing." And, and I told him my why, and he goes, "That's great. You want some help?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing." I was just really raw and I was very humble. And I think that's a big key for any listeners, is that you have to be very humble. Your people will come help you. Like, your help and your resources are around more than you think. And I didn't know who he was at the time. And we were talking for a few more minutes, and he's like, "Have you ever heard of youngentrepreneur.com?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And I was like, "Yeah, they were like the biggest platform in the world at one point." So some of the listeners may not know this. So youngentrepreneur.com sold to entrepreneur.com. It was youngentrepreneur.com at one point had, I believe, more traffic than entrepreneur.com. Right.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, these guys were the biggest forum in the world. And I was like, of course I knew who they are. I'm like, but man, I was like, they sold for like, I don't know, like buttloads of money. They did all kinds of things. And he's like, "Something like that." And I was like, "Oh shit." I'm like, "Was that you?" And he was like, "And my brother and I." And he said, you still want help?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir, I do." And he's Just been our advisors ever since. And so, you know, behind the scenes, I know there's a lot that people see like on social media and they don't always know like what's going on, but like behind the scenes, we were very fortunate to have very good people around us that like, you know, the people that are all celebrated online, they've all like at some point been in contact with our advisors because like they were all at one point on youngentrepreneur.com or on one of these, you know, platforms that they owned. Right. And so yeah, so we all started kind of coming together. I said, you should check out this guy Case. No competition. I didn't care. It wasn't like I was giving something away. I was like, hey, you should check out this guy over here. He's really cool what he's doing. And he's like, I like both of you. I think you guys should maybe form a company over time. And I was like, well, maybe we'll do that. We started all growing. We ended up launching a podcast because our audience asked for it. We hit over 1 million downloads last year, 2 years into it. And we merged our assets together. Along the way, we got featured in Forbes, Inc. I think Fortune, not Fortune, Entrepreneur, Mashable, CNN, something like that. It was crazy. So just for building this media company and delivering content differently.
Yeah, I guess it's from what you're saying. I guess like if your sort of heart and mind and intention is in the right place, I guess that it sounds like the resources almost are attracted to you. And that's when people start thinking that, oh, this is a coincidence or you're lucky. And it's like you actually set yourself up to be in that place, you know, for those things to happen. They didn't just happen, you know, because you acted on that dream or that vision that you had of doing something that was a bit more purposeful in your life than whatever it was you were doing up until that point. So it's interesting because as you said, online, all you see is the surface level sort of success which is most of it is material. You don't get to see the behind the scenes sort of story of how the person actually got there. And I guess the journey is more important than the actual destination, because the journey is what makes you the person. So at the end of the day, you can have all the materials, but if you're not feeling fulfilled or you don't enjoy where you are in your life, what's the point of it all? So I guess, would you agree it's about enjoying and trusting the journey?
Yeah. So all of these really successful companies or brands or individuals, they were purposeful and intentional with, it could be anything. It could have been their product, their industry, their niche. They were just so into it. Like they were just so into their thing that when you do it from that kind of place, yeah, you're gonna attract people to it because you're doing it from almost like a soul level. I know that sounds, but it's very true. That's why, like, you know, Apple has its has its credibility today. Laughed at for years, except for the people, the early adopters, right? But they did things from a completely different place by understanding what, you know, the user experience and really being so hardcore about that. So if you look at a lot of really successful brands, I think out there, they're all purposeful and intentional for the most part. And to your point, the latter point about the journey, it's all, your destination is death, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like where most people, I'm trying to get to here, I'm trying to get to here, I'm trying to get to here, and then what? Right? And then what? We're gonna, like, so if you get there next year, you're gonna sit for the next 40, 50 years doing nothing? Like, no. We're all constantly living in the journey. It's what we do with that time. And I think that there's a lot of overwhelm, and it's something that I've dealt with too. There's a lot of overwhelm for the success in a lot of ways, depending on how we define it, as if those measurements will bring us fulfillment. But I also get it. There's that overwhelm because you're wanting to fulfill your purpose. You're wanting to fulfill, like, I can do this. I know I can do this, and I'm capable, and I'm going to do this. So but when you do that, you start chasing, you start putting a lot of overwhelm that sometimes you end up missing the bigger picture of what's really going on, both with your life in the present moment and actually the people that you're even doing it for, your market or your demographic, your customer base. So the journey is where you get to figure out all of the details, both about yourself and the people you're doing it for. And then it becomes, kind of more like lifelong, the process, and you end up having a lot more fun versus like, I've got to be here, I've got to be here, I've got to be here. No, I've got to be right here, present moment, working on this thing for these people to move this initiative forward. And I don't have all the answers, and the only way I'll have the answers is if I keep having a relationship with the people I do it for, so I can keep building on it. And in having that relationship with the people I do it for, I also learn a lot about who I am as a leader, as an individual, as a man in this world, and where I'm going to. So the journey is everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely does make sense. I think that's where when you realize this, that's where the enjoyment is, because you don't feel
Yes.
like you have to be impatient every single day and wait for that perfect day or that perfect moment. You're just letting it all unfold and unravel as time goes on, knowing that you're taking the right action along the way. So, I'm interested to know. With obviously you've been in entrepreneurship for a long time now, understanding the online space. So mentally, is this a struggle that you've had? I mean, how did you deal with it yourself? Because obviously there must have been a point where you felt a little bit more materially attached to that side of the world, rather than having the perspective you do now, which it seems like it's something that can be adopted and realized over time.
Yeah, I can expand on that a few a few different ways. Uh, so I mean, I'm in my 30s, but when I was in my 20s, I definitely chased a lot more. Even my early 30s, I chased a lot. Um, Chase, meaning I just prove myself in this world and get these things as measurements of success, etc. I think that I was coming from a perspective of like that. And the funny thing is not necessarily to impress other people, was more so to like as if that was a measurement for me. Like I needed something tangible or something something just uh, physical or some form of a measurement. But I never actually questioned, well, what about my happiness? You know what I mean? Like, and if you and it was funny. I was talking to somebody a while back, a very spiritually big influencer type person, and he said something like, it's interesting. We all constantly like chase things, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, all right, so think about this. Why is it that people chase these things? And I said, oh, they want the money. And he goes, right, okay. What are the things that they chase? Are like money, material things, or just titles, or whatever it might be. They're chasing, right? And he goes, yeah. And he's like, what do you think it is? Why do they want more money? I'm like, oh, they want to be, happy, free. They want to be, you know, independent. They want to feel this, feel that. And he goes, great. He's like, all very good points. He's like, are you aware that every single thing that you just mentioned is a feeling, and feelings are free? And I was like, oh shit. I
Light bulb
was like,
moment.
and I mean, if I had to paraphrase, that's pretty more or less how the conversation was going. And it's a story that I've told a few people. Like, you realize like that, it's, if you're chasing something, it's because you're hoping it's going to fulfill you. Um, that's, so that's why I say, if you're going to chase anything, chase your purpose, because your purpose is what's going to fulfill you. And I get that gets thrown out by all kinds of people online, like chase your passion, chase your purpose. It's still hard work, and it's still introspective, and you still have to like go inside and like actually be honest with yourself and do all this stuff. But yeah, I realized that when I was chasing all these things, I still wasn't necessarily happy. And then ultimately, those very things, some of them even got taken away from me. So like, but you can't, how you feel internally, that's something like you can work on, where nobody can take away your soul. Well, if you don't let it, at least, but like,
Yeah,
how you feel internally. So I think once I hit a point where I lost a lot of things that I had initially chased, that I realized it was time to think about the bigger picture. And then that's where I realized that, we have to define our own way of success, and embrace more of like, yeah, that's where the journey becomes so important, because it's like you can feel whatever you want to feel right now. You don't have to
yeah.
actually have a certain car or house to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, you're completely right, and I think that's where a level of self mastery and self awareness comes into it. And also hiring your level of consciousness, because then you realize that I sometimes think of it in the same way you do, and it's just like looking at the things around you. Fine, yeah, it's cool. We need to have money to live in this world, exist and trade, and have the necessities to live a basic sort of life at least. But then beyond all that, what happens in the end? You're dead. So like in
Yeah.
the end, as you said, you don't come out of this game alive anyway. So you may as well do something that you're going to enjoy. And to figure out what it is you enjoy, you need to take some time to introspect, to be silent, not to just move from one thing to the next, the car, the house, the marriage, the next girlfriend, whatever it is. And I think we just get stuck up in that mentality that we not only have to prove ourselves, we have to prove to the neighbor or the best friend or your parents or whatever it is, when in fact each of you are going to individually die in your own time frame, and no one is going to remember any of that, any of the petty stuff, apart from if you had a big enough impact that's going to live after you, which is what this whole podcast, my whole movement and community is about, which is know your legacy. So what is it you're going to leave behind that's a lot more valuable than just material objects? Because to me, legacy is not about passing down your house to the kids or passing down £1 million in a trust. It's about what is it that you've done that outlasts you, because you're only here for a short period of time. And I always like to say, try and create some, we live here for a short period of time, so in that time try and create something that's going to last for a long period of time. So what are your views on that? I mean, that this whole conversation obviously comes about from the fact that you should be looking at your life from a purposeful perspective rather than material. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. First, some of these entrepreneurs that you see online that are the ones I respect and admire they're not only doing well, they even when they talk about some of the material things, like they say like it's okay to celebrate and have material things and whatnot, but that's you should own them, they shouldn't own you, and you shouldn't be chasing the thing that you're chasing so you can have those things. That's the byproduct of really going after your purpose. They're just living in their purpose, and we're just seeing sort of, again, kind of sometimes the end results. We didn't see the first 13 years that they were trying to make it work, so I wanted to throw that part out there, is that it's like nice things are okay. They're total. In fact, you ironically, when you go after your purpose, you can make way more money than you ever did not. I have like it's a completely different, because you're in alignment with doing what you should be doing. That it ends up attracting the things that you and the people that you need to be doing stuff with, versus kind of like forcing yourself in other areas where you're just creating resistance, right? So but I believe that exactly what you said, that it's about leaving a legacy behind, and something that lives well beyond me. What did I do while I was here? My father used to always tell me, you can't take it with you when you die. You can take the money. I mean, yeah, you can donate it. Yeah, you can do all kinds of things, before you pass, but you can't take it with you. We're just a soul. Like and he's a good businessman. He is a good businessman. I should say is. Sorry, he's still alive. But he said you can't take it with you when you go. So how will you behave while you are here? Right. And so how we behave while we were here, how did we impact other people's lives or change, other people for the better? How did we live from a place that was very intentional, and in doing so, I think that is what creates ultimately the legacy, like the companies that you're tied to, or the foundations that you do, or or start, or the people that you collaborated with, the lives that you changed, like all of that. Those are feelings, they can live on, right? Like, oh, I remember when people did that. I remember when Matt did that. I remember, God, like I wouldn't be alive today if so and so didn't do that for me. Those things live on. Money gets transferred. So, like, I mean, and nowadays in the media world, like look at it now, like we see some of the biggest, most successful people pass on, and we're like, we mourn for several days, and then boom, like all of a sudden it's like, things just start moving again, right? And it's like, oh yeah, has it already been a year since so and so passed away? You know what I mean? Like, but we honor the people. We honor the people who passed away often by what they left behind, what they did while they were here. Their music, their art, their businesses, their brands, their mantras. Who they were. Their energy is still here because of how they led their life while they were alive. So I definitely believe in that. That's why legends never die, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Legacies never die.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And just the point you made about the, people leaving their art, their music, etc. behind it. I find that a real life example is Michael Jackson. I think the world stopped for a good few months when he passed away. And obviously he was a legend in his field, but, no one's mourning anymore, but we're all still listening to his music. So that just goes to show you, and that's been going on for decades. So, and I'm sure it'll be for decades to come as well. So, I mean, just on this topic, then, I mean, for people that are maybe feeling a little bit lost or are in their early 20s, possibly, now that you've sort of passed that stage and you're a bit more self-aware, what would you tell them in terms of finding their purpose? How would they go about actually figuring that out for themselves?
I had this conversation with somebody the other night, a young entrepreneur, So everybody's going to give you a whole bunch of advice. Everyone's going to tell you, do this, don't do that, do this, do this, do that, do this. But if no two people have the exact same route, we have to be very careful about the information that we get from from people telling us you should go to school or you should get this job, you should stay with this job, you should do those things. I think that it just takes a couple different things. It takes asking the really tough questions of yourself, like what's an ideal life for you? Like what's a vision? And I don't mean necessarily like living in a certain type of house. Like what's a vision? Like what just feels good? I also learned something really interesting. Whatever it is that you're kind of almost infatuated with from about the age of 14, 15 till about 21, 22, there's actually a lot of gut instinct going on during that time frame about what you really want to do or what, what resonates with your soul, or what is probably even part of your purpose. What happens at about 22, 23, 24 years old is, the typical, when are you going to get responsible? You should get a job. You should do this. You should do that. This is should. This is what you need to do. Well, this is what I did. So this is what you need to do, and it's bullshit. If you really want my opinion, like, I mean, it, hopefully it's done with love from people. And I get it. I totally get it. But what starts to happen is people almost move away from the very thing that they feel internally to become quote unquote responsible. Let me ask you, like, what's more responsible? Like, following the herd, following the crowd, and not having, really built something for yourself or worked on something that just resonates with you, or that, or the latter, right? Or working on something like that's internal, that's purposeful. So I think you have to really, you can look at that time frame, right, of your life, and see like what just always seemed to be your natural curiosity. And then B, I think you need to start asking really good questions to yourself and to very smart people, that are either where you would want to be or that, have truly done something, that you admire. That's why you would ask them, right? And so when you start asking questions is when all the answers start coming. And that's, and not right away. So that's the other thing is I recently learned too, is that, and this is what I was explaining to this entrepreneur. He said, I'm looking for some answers. And I said, okay. And he said, and I was like, well, how quickly do you want them? And, he's a good guy. He's a smart guy. He's 24. And I said, how quickly do you want them? And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, we somehow got into this, mode where we ask a question and then we demand an answer right away. And he's like, huh. And I'm like, think about that for a second. I was like, so we want a question and we're supposed to solve everything in like a second, just like that. I'm like, now we're asking people for their inputs, right? He goes, yeah. I'm like, are they having the same life experiences as you? Are they going to end up doing the exact same things as you? Are they all of these things? I'm like, so they're giving you answers right away. And I was like, is that going to help you? Or like, how is that meant to be? And I actually learned this from a podcast, and it was Abraham Hicks talked about how like, we're in this kind of demand generation where we ask a question, we want an answer right away, but like that answer is almost a forced answer because we need something to know right away, versus just asking a question, like putting it out there, for the universe or for God or how, whatever spiritual, however you want to like think about it, but like just put the question out there and be willing to receive answers over the coming hours, days, weeks, be present. So when you ask questions and you're really curious about your next steps of where you want to go with your life or your business, you don't need the answer right away, but it'll come quicker if you don't like force it. So, you can ask the questions and then all of a sudden, like, you see this all the time. People say, the weirdest thing happened. I was just thinking of you and you called me, or I was out today and I was wondering how this was going to happen. And all of a sudden this person came and this happened. What a coincidence. I'm like, there's no coincidences. It's like, we're energy. Whatever we put out is what, essentially we're calling in for our answers, or calling in for that. This makes sense. I know I'm going on a tangent.
Yeah. No,
but,
I love it.
yeah.
I love it. That's what I try and do, is just draw out these sort of answers from people like yourself, because the knowledge is all stored up there, and it's my job to try and get it out of you. So no, it's really good, because I think people will resonate with what you're saying, and I think what I'm curious about is, obviously you went through this similar sort of period about 4 or 5 years ago when you were sort of crossing the threshold from what you did before. to now creating HDF and moving in a more sort of purposeful direction, what were the questions that you were asking yourself at the time?
Well, as a man, I mean, it's like I asked myself, like, well, who am I as a guy? Like, who am I as a man in this world? Who am I as a man in society? Who am I as a man in business? Who am I as a man as a potential mate? So I went through a divorce, and so I started thinking about that. I was like, who am I as a man, like, for myself and for a potential mate? Um, what would I want from my life, like, and what don't I already understand? It's about really being honest with yourself and kind of getting out of your head. I think that the problem is that most people, they want answers before they leave. They want to know how it's all going to turn out. And I just ask myself, like, what's really important, and then I just leapt. I mean, I leaped. Sorry, like I went out, and I started making movement happen. The fact is that we don't really have any answers unless we actually do something, right? And I explain this in both business and in people's personal lives or in their spiritual self or whatever. Like, the only way you're ever going to get an answer to anything is if you just take like a step, like just move, right? So like, if, I wanted to know more about, I didn't realize I was going to have a media company. I just knew that I wanted to, soulfully, I wanted to create more impact and bring more awareness to the people that I thought mattered. And then boom, all of a sudden I ended up smack dab in the middle of like a media company. So I think things are revealed to you along the way as you continue to just like keep questioning yourself in that moment. So at that time, I was just really curious about, like, who am I in this world and what do I really want? Like, what really matters? And then also I asked myself, like, what have I done for others lately?
Yeah,
And even though I was I was an unselfish person, it didn't matter. I didn't feel like I was being of service. And I think that somewhere along the line, sometimes people get taught, like, oh, being of service, like, means it's, donating time and this. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like, even the most successful people, the reason why their companies did well is they serviced the customer to their best of ability. They took care of these people, and I started thinking about how could I best be of service to this world? Like, what could I really be doing? And it seemed silly at the time, but I just did it anyways because, I even had people in the startup community be like, really, a blog, an online publication? Like, where's this thing gonna go?
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like, I have no idea. You know
yeah,
what? Like, it's resonating now. I'm like, why don't I just shut the hell up for a minute and actually just help people and see where that goes? And then suddenly I ended up with a media company that reaches 10 million people a month, or I ended up with advisors and business people around me that are constantly teaching me, like, even more, experiences in business or betterment of self. I ended up around world-renowned nutritionists that are like, I'll help you with your diet and understanding your body. I mean, that's just it. Like, we help others, and then all of a sudden our life kind of takes form. So,
yeah.
so I was asking, how could I be service to others at that point?
Yeah, yeah. I just want to touch on the point about taking the step and then it being revealed to you. And the way I was just talking to a friend about this, and an image just came to mind that really resonated, which is like, if you've got thick fog, you can't see beyond that fog unless you actually walk through the fog. So you have to physically go through it to see what the next steps are, and you can only see about 1 or 2 meters ahead of you at a time. You're not going to be able to see the whole street until you walk. So that's how I really feel that the journey of life is when you're asking those bigger questions, the answers won't be revealed straight away, but if you take 1 or 2 steps, slowly the next door will open, and then the next door. No, they won't all open at the same time because you can't go through them all at once anyway. So yeah, it's I guess it's just taking it one decision at a time, isn't it? So I mean, in terms of, so everything we've talked about obviously is for the individual. Now you've got experience understanding how the brand of a business works, because you've been doing sort of or understanding digital brands for the last, I think, 18 years, is it now? And so
Yeah.
what would you say makes a good brand, taking into consideration everything that we've just discussed and everything you've learned up to this point as well?
I repeat it over and over again. I will always repeat it over and over again. Community. When you build community around your brand, you rally, your army, if you will, like brand ambassadors, loyalists, repeat customers. The customer lifetime value goes up. what makes a good brand is that they are in tune with the people that they are doing it with, and they are constantly, they're very transparent. They're very direct. They're very intentional. They're very communicative to their audience. They're constantly listening to them, but they're also leading them. There's like a dual relationship in that, right? And I even had somebody say to me the other day, they're like, "Whoa, they work for big pharma," and he said, "Yeah, but like if you ask the customers, like they're not always right." I'm like, Henry Ford did say that if I had asked, what the customer wanted, they'd say more horses. Obviously he goes on and makes the car. Um, and I said, yeah, no, I'm like, your job as a brand is to understand the problems that your audience is having. You bring the solutions, but you test the solutions with them. And so long as they see that you are working for them, they will be paying you. Or just in general, like as a, they'll be growing with you if, you're not selling anything, you're just wanting to grow a brand just to grow it. But the idea is it's all community centric. We have a relationship. I'm listening to you and I'm trying to also help you. And I can't help you unless you tell me how you feel or what you need in this specific niche, industry, or whatever focus it is, right? So I think that's what makes brands the most successful, is this community aspect. And then what happens is, and I've seen a couple, I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk that might have said this a few years back. Which would you rather have, a million followers, and only like maybe 30,000, potential customers were ready to pull the trigger, or 80,000 followers and like 70,000 of them ready to like, to pull the trigger, to buy, or to follow you into battle, right? Like, it's that engagement, it is what makes a brand successful. So that's where numbers are tricky. Everybody's such a numbers driven society that they see numbers online. They think like, oh, wow, that brand's got 1 million followers. Like, yeah, but they're also in the red. They're not making any money. Like they care more about perception. And then you get, I have a friend of mine, very successful entrepreneur, very successful. He's in his year 5, and he's got a fitness brand, and he crushes it. I mean, he has less than like 9,000 followers, and then 7,000 diehard followers on Facebook. And I mean diehard, like an army. And this man makes more than people who have 500,000 followers. And I mean, like, decimates them in terms of revenue. And he says cyber tribes, right? Like community around your brand, having that interaction with your brand, and really just blocking out all the noise of everybody else and doing it for the people that you're doing it for. And then you'll grow, and they'll continue to keep purchasing products from you, and grow your initiative, grow your purpose.
Yeah. So, I mean, one interesting thing you said there is obviously, growing your community, and it seems like engagement is the main thing that you'd want to look for rather than the numbers. But I think a lot of people that I've found, what they're asking in the online community now is, how do you actually increase that engagement? I mean, how have you been able to do it for some of the brands that you've consulted for, or even for yourself as well?
Yeah, that's like and it changes daily, right? As Instagram and Facebook and everybody changes their algorithms. So, it's there's definitely a mix. There's always the organic, and then there's also the paid media. And I think that you can't be afraid to get into the paid media side. My HDF magazine Instagram, that was all organic, and then a few influencers early on that we were all part of kind of a network together, right? And because it gave us all exposure to each other's networks. And I think that's just really key, is that if you find the right influencers to align with, your content getting out in front of their networks is just the key to growing it. Or like doing something like what we're doing, right? So like this is awesome. We're building a connection. You asked me to be on your podcast. Of course, I would share that with my audience. And so I get to put that on my audience. Basically, co-creation through different, if you've got an account and a brand online, who could you go align with that you could actually do something together, create a piece of content, create a campaign, create a product together, do something together. That's all it really is. That allows two networks to come together and and basically expose each other's content to each other. And then some have said, well, I'm a really small account versus a bigger account. Yeah, but so what you're doing is actually what I did back at the beginning. I was featuring creators, entrepreneurs, that they had good core followings, people who really believed in what they were doing. So I would go out of my way to make the content, interview them, get all their visuals, put it all up online. I basically was working for them for free for their PR. But what that ended up doing is that, first of all, they really appreciated, they're like, the fact that they're like, wow, you want to tell my story. Second, they were like, no one really ever understood me before. So I'm staying on brand because it's like understanding the creators, on their journey. And then they had such diehard followings that when they would go blast it out to their following, those people would come back to, my Instagram or to my website. And I ended up building up, email lists and followers and stuff like that. Right. So there's also an exchange. And I know Gary Vaynerchuk and other people have talked about this before, because I've also had people come to me who are like, hey man, like, can you just give me a shout? I'm like, what? I'm like, because I did it the opposite way. And it was funny. There was an episode Gary Vee did when he was at his barber, and he was talking about this, how like, he's like, it's interesting when people hit me up and they go, hey Gary, like, can I get a shout? He's like, no, you can't. He's like, or you can do for me, and he's like, and I know how that sounds at first. He's like, but the fact is, he's like, I spent time and money and content and my experience and my resources, everything to build this. And then you want to just kind of come in and say, hey, help me out. Here's a handout. Like, he's like, you would never respect that. And nor would you want to. He's like, that's not how it works. He's like, now, if you came to me and said, hey, I created this cool thing for you with video, check this out. Maybe you can use that. He's like, and you're helping me. Well, I'm going to put that on my wall, and that's going to drive a shit ton of traffic to you. Like a mutual exchange of co-creation, if you will. Right. I think that that's some of the best way to really grow online. Truly, like anytime you can do anything collaborative with other brands, is bringing more exposure to both of you in a different light. That's key. That's killer. That's how you really get out in front of a lot of people. And then, because then you end up kind of in pods of getting associated with certain people too. So you have to really think about it. You don't want to get in, you don't want to get in collaboration with the wrong people. You have to really think about, not just from a number standpoint, which a lot of people do. Like, yeah, let's do this together because they want the numbers. No, like, think about it like, hey, I love what you do as a brand. I do this. I'd love to see if I can add value to you, and maybe we can, have this exchange, and then, of course, we'll blast it out to our networks and hopefully, get the message out there for what we're trying to create. I think when you approach it from that standpoint, oh man, the possibilities are endless to grow.
Yeah, so. It's the number one thing I think you touched on was the co-creation. And I truly believe in that. And I think it's over the past 6 months that I accidentally came across that realization, just because the whole reason the podcast started was because of me wanting to build it was a brand, and then I naturally changed it into community. And I don't know where the idea came from. It just felt right, rather than having it go down the route of merchandise and courses and selling things to people. I was like, well, no, I feel like I need to build a community for some odd reason first. And then it made sense, because then the engagement would naturally grow, because I'm building a community, I'm building trust, I'm building loyal, diehard followers. So when it comes time to selling something, they will buy it because they know me by that point. I'm not just a random person online trying to shove something down their throat. And the second thing is being careful of who I reach out to. For example, I reach out to you because I listen to your content. I've been following you for a few years, and I just love your perspective on certain things and would love to dive deeper, which is what we've done here. And I think, your audience is very similar to my own in terms of the things they're interested in. And so when you blast out the content, and vice versa, when I do it, it's only going to benefit us, rather than me, reaching out to someone and their audience is not really in line with what I'm trying to accomplish. And I think you get mixed up in the numbers game if you don't understand what your purpose is in the first place, as in your purpose for what you're trying to do. So yeah, I guess it all comes down to sort of having introspection, whether you're a company or a brand or just an individual trying to, achieve something in your life. So in terms of HDF then, where is it going next? I know you've got so much success with it so far, and you've gained a lot of good traction. Where do you sort of see it going in the next few years?
That's a good question. I'm actually just trying to see just to your exact point. So I'll post this right onto Instagram. So there you go, man. So I hope you don't mind, man.
Go ahead, man. Yeah.
So there you go, through the creation process, and I'll even use which account do you want me to use?
What do you mean? As in, for my own, or?
Instagram, yeah.
You can use Know Your Legacy because that's where this podcast will be posted anyway.
Perfect. Cool. So, but that's how that works, right? Like in doing this, even capturing it in real time and sharing with our each
Yeah.
other's. I like that you said that, and it's true. It's really true about the community. And then I'll get into the HDF part again. Because of I realized that even what I was doing on Instagram was great, but I wanted to take that relationship a level deeper, and I'll have you come into the community on Facebook. Um, I created a Facebook group called Alchemy Tribe. It's a business brand and marketing and influencer community, but it's meant to talk about both the business side and the passion that and all that fun the business marketing side, but also like your life. Like let's talk about like what's going on up here in the mind, or whatever. But that community was born because I wanted to know more about my audience versus them just liking and following my account. And so you're right. Like sometimes you end up stumbling at things, and that turned into 700, creatives and creators and entrepreneurs and bloggers from around the world, and they're just talking about stuff that trips them up, or what they want to know more about, but like an organic community. Because I've seen some of these communities on there, like they just wanted to build it to 10, 20, 30,000 people, and I'm like, no, I really care about each and every single person that's in there. So, but where I see the vision with HDF, it's an interesting one because we talk about this a lot. So Case and I, so Pursuit and HDF are basically, two different platforms, but same initiative, meaning like he's got, creators and entrepreneurs from around the world that are authoring their, what they're experiencing. And and HDF is featuring people like from around the world and what they're going through and whatnot. We see it to expand on the content, more in like to video and actually like taking it very much into in-person type of a mode where, we're interacting with, these creators in their own town, anywhere around the world. And like just walking through like the process, like what are they going through, and not like the end result, like, oh, where'd you sell your company for $50 million? It's like, no, like, so last year I was working in that building over there, and then we ended up moving over here to doing this, and here's what we're doing now, to make it real time. We also actually want to go in on events. Now that's today. I mean, we hope that it stays this way. That is part of the vision. We would like to do events, but we're almost like the unevent event or the anti-event event, meaning, you see so many of these great events out there, and I'll give your audience this is a great way to like lean startup it, right? But you see some of these events out there. We don't want to be like those events. There's nothing wrong with them, but so many of them are like, how can I sell you stuff? Or like, get a whole bunch of people there just to speak motivationally to you and all that stuff. And, and so Case and I literally, so Case grew our Pursuit newsletter from 8,000 to 100,000 in 5 months, starting in October to today. He went to a daily newsletter. He said, screw just sending people to the website. Let me interact with them like a community in a daily email. I created Alchemy Tribe. I interact with these 700 entrepreneurs, daily. So what we did is, and he grew his list to 100,000. He's got a 52% open rate. So we went and we actually started interviewing our following and saying, what was a bad experience you had with an event? What didn't you like? What do you want? Like, what do you actually want from like, experiences when you do go to an event or a conference or something like where you're interacting with all kinds of people? And it was crazy. Like I had inside Alchemy Tribe over 20 videos of people telling me like their experiences, right? And then we've had over 400 responses in less than 24 hours about like what people have experienced in an event, what they would want to see. So A, we remove the overwhelm of actually creating something, right? Something new. And B, giving people exactly what they want. And so events are something that we really want to do going forward. Like that's like kind of like a hybrid of like a complex con meets, which is out in LA. It's like your sneakerheads, your internet media companies, your music people, but meets like, kind of like your mindful side too, and just get people connected and feeling more human in their process and their journey, and actually doing a lot more interactive engagement. So we really want to like set up kind of like, and it allows people to, where it's like a create and cultivate, like Jacqueline Johnson out in LA, where people just coming together and they're seeing like all the possibilities that they have that they can do. And then, when those networks come together, you can create that much more, right? So we see that. So it's so expanding as a media company in video, expanding into events, kind of being almost like an events company. And then also, just integrating in with other uh, brands and other initiatives where it makes sense, so we can kind of also help grow awareness for the companies that make sense. So we also see like having a venture arm, right? Because like if you have that much distribution, and I go like this, hey, like guys, check out this app or check out people's podcast, boom, you drive 1 million people to download. So that's having an authentic audience allows you to also raise awareness to some initiatives or drive business growth to others. So we also see having maybe potentially a venture arm as well. So
yeah, that's all exciting stuff. So yeah, I'm sure, because you're quite deep into the journey already. So I'm sure there'll be no time before you get there and start doing the events. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully I can attend as well and experience it firsthand.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull you into the Alchemy Tribe as well too, and on Facebook. And but I'd love for you to come to the event, man. Absolutely.
No,
Hopefully
no.
later this year.
Oh yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
just to wrap up with the last three questions that I like to ask everyone, I'm looking forward to seeing what you'd say. So the first one is, with everything that you've learned and experienced so far in your journey, if you were to go back to the 18-year-old Matt, what would you tell him if you were to tell him anything?
To have more patience, to to not worry so much about how it's all going to happen. Um, to I took a lot of chances, but I would say to find to maybe not make them as hard by finding people who already did some of the things that I wanted to do earlier on. Go find them and just go sit with them and see how you can help them and be around them. You know, I try to do a lot of it either on my own or with other inexperienced people. And so it was harder that way versus like being around sometimes the more experienced people that kind of showed me the way, right? That happened a little bit later on. And just not to take it so seriously, if and try not to force too many things. Anytime you try to force or chase anything, you're causing resistance and you're making it even harder on yourself and more overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. I think the patience is going to resonate with a lot of people, because I think that's something you learn over time. It's something that comes to fruition at a certain point in your journey, or the individual's journey. So, so the second thing is, if you could write anything in a time capsule for 3 generations to read, so that's your children's children's children. If you could write anything, what would it be?
Um, whew, that's a great question. Um, I'd probably do. I have to write something, or can I like leave something behind?
Anything, anything.
I'd be I think it'd be curious to. I think it'd be cool to like leave something behind and be like, look how primitive we look, right? Look how like I probably if I could write something that would transcend time, I'd probably say that that anything is possible, and that you reading this right now even shows you how far and how vast the mind has expanded and what it's actually been able to create. Like I'm writing to you today from a level of like where what we've been able to do up until now, and you're living in another time frame that just goes to show you like how much more now exists because of like what the human mind is capable of. I'd probably write something from that kind of nature, maybe even show a few examples like look at what we're using for phones today, but you guys now can teleport from like from one place to another, and anything is truly possible, and that it just goes to show you how far the mind can really push the boundaries.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful message, and I think that's something that I think every generation is going to resonate with, because it's just unfathomable, the extent of the human mind when you truly use it for what it's capable of. It wows you every single time. So the last question, we touched on this a little bit earlier on, but imagine yourself now as the 90-year-old Matt. You're looking back at your life, and what's the legacy or the message you want to leave behind for the world?
Ooh. Um, I'd still stick with the anti-status quo. Is that no one is you, and that is your power, right? I wish I could remember who the author is on that, but it's no one is you, and that is your power. Nobody has the same route as you. Nobody has the same journey as you. Nobody has the same experiences as you. You have to really go inside yourself and understand who you are in this world, and understand like how you can bring your purpose to this world and create impact. your soul is different than your body. You know, I mean, like, your body's just a shell. Your soul has things it wants to do while it's here. So, you know, make sure that you're using it to serve and do big things. And don't be afraid to do big things. Don't be afraid to do the thing that's opposite that everybody's going to make fun of you as. Don't be afraid to try new things that, you know, freak everybody else out. If people aren't supporting you, it's only showing you where their limitations are. The people who truly support you and care about you, or believe in you, they'll show you. And so you cannot, and regardless of whether somebody supports you or doesn't support you, go do it if it resonates with you, because that's really where you're going to find out what you're really made of. And also, everything always works out, you know, so you can't worry about somebody telling you what will or won't work. That's just something coming from their own fear. It has nothing to do with you. It's all mental.
Yeah, I love that. It's a powerful message. And that's very similar to a quote that I love to live by. I've said this over and over again, and I've continued to say it because it's the number one quote that I love to live by. And it's by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he says, "Don't go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." And that for me is just, every single time it just gives me goosebumps, because that is what I want to do with my life. You know, go somewhere that's on an untrodden path, and and just leave a trail. So, no, with that, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time out today. Definitely look forward to speaking with you again. So I appreciate the time you've taken out.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on the show. And I am like coming off of like very um, uh, minimal sleep and so much stuff going on. So anytime you ever need to redo this, you let me know. I'll be there to do it. 'Cause I know
No,
I started going
no,
on tangent, but it's so coming from a partial tired state. But I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
no problem, man.